Today's episode is brought to you by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. It can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more podcast platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started right now. Welcome to Unforbidden Truth. I'm Andrew. On this episode, I'll be speaking with Timothy Tyler. Timothy Tyler is a former federal lifer under the federal three strikes law. Timothy Tyler served 24 years and 27 days in a federal penitentiary before his prison sentence was commuted by President Barack Obama shortly before he left office. Tim was officially released on August 30th, 2018. I speak with Tim about his upbringing in life, him touring the country attending Grateful Dead concerts, the crimes that landed him in prison, his life in prison, his commutation, and his subsequent release from prison and what he's up to these days. Here's my interview with Timothy Tyler. I'm here with Timothy Tyler. Timothy, how's the free world treating you?
Oh, it's very good. I can't believe that I'm free every single day. So I always say that, like I'm lucky, you know, even after almost 2 years, on August 30th, it'll be 2 years. You still don't take it for granted. And you also, like, I guess you see things way different, you know, because as you know, I was never scheduled to be released. So, yeah, very lucky to be free.
Right. Most definitely. It's a blessing that you were able to get out and, you know, be able to fight for these other guys and gals in prison with similar convictions and sentences like yourself. Let's start with talking about your childhood. What was it like growing up as a child for you?
Yeah, I grew up in Connecticut, in Terryville, Connecticut. And my father and my mother divorced when I was very young, probably 3 years old. And it was like I just grew up in the middle of nowhere. Pretty much I didn't watch television. I actually didn't even listen to music until I was probably like 11 years old, maybe. Or probably no, maybe 12. Way different than the kids nowadays. You know, I didn't have, I was more like going ice skating on the lake that we lived by, or going out hiking at the sand pit, or swimming at this hidden lake right near our house. It's much different than people nowadays, I guess. It was, you know, normal childhood, I guess, other than that.
Did you ever suffer any type of abuse or trauma growing up?
Well, that's an interesting story. I had a stepdad that, you know, came in my room when I was young, and I guess tried to show me how a man's body works, because I didn't know. You know, I was just in prison and I had to take a class in order to get out of prison, right? And in the class, you know, I spoke about this stuff in front of the class, and they would try to tell me, oh, that's sexual abuse, or that's physical abuse, or that. And then there's another part where he used to like lift me up on my hair when I was like 12 growing up and make me fight him. But I always looked at it like, by him doing that, it helped me, like while I was in prison, not have fear. You know what I mean? So I didn't look at it as any negative thing. Well, of course, they will be adamant to tell me that, no, that was abuse. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I just didn't look at it like that. And I still don't really, because if I didn't have that experience, then I probably wouldn't have adapted to my environment the way I did inside.
So you feel like it kind of toughened you up for when you were in prison, and you weren't soft because of what happened when you were a child?
For sure. Yeah. That's the way I looked at it the whole time.
Have you ever been diagnosed with any mental illnesses prior to being in prison, while or after being released from prison?
No, not since being released. Before, I had did LSD a few times, and I had a few, I guess you would say, manic episodes, you know. But I mean, I was fine. It's just that if you're tripping, like nowadays, if you're tripping and you're having a bad time, say you're at a concert, they'll take you into a tent area and they'll, walk you through it, talk you through it. Back in the day, if you was having a bad time, or even if you was having a good time and they thought you were drunk or something, they would snatch you, take you to a mental hospital, inject you. I mean, and then it starts you on this, seeming like a never-ending medication and all this other kind of stuff.
Were you ever hospitalized for any incidents like that?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, one time in Connecticut, I was just talking to my mom and my stepfather, and then my mother. I don't know, it was just a weird situation, and they ended up taking me down and put me in observation for a couple of days. But I was tripping again. Nowadays they'll do something different. You specifically I know at concerts now they would take people to, there's people that will help you, and they'll walk you through it and you'll be fine in a few hours. If you were, say, on hallucinogen and somebody, you were just having a bad time with it, or even not having a bad time with it, if somebody didn't understand what you were doing or whatever, back then they would just bring you there and inject you. You know what I mean? Like, they ask you who the president is, what year is it, all that stuff. Even though you answer properly, they're still going to come with a team to inject you, which is totally, something that should have never been done to anybody. And I was subject to that, a couple of times, and it was not. So it's certainly not something that I would ever wish to happen upon anybody also.
Do you feel like that was a traumatic experience when you had gone through that?
Sure it was, because they'll inject you and they'll tell you there's no such thing as normal, and you have to take medication for the rest of your life and all this other stuff. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I would definitely say that.
What were your teenage years like growing up until you were in high school?
Seemed like I was sort of a class clown in a way. And in ninth grade, I was in Connecticut and went to technical school, Caner Tech. And then I wasn't welcome back the next year. So I went to, and I also wanted to go to my father lived in Florida and my mother lived in Connecticut. And I wanted to be with my father. So I ended up going to Florida and graduating in St. Petersburg, Florida, near his home.
And shortly after high school, you started touring the country, attending Grateful Dead concerts. What was that like as a teenager, fresh out of high school, traveling the country, doing LSD and God knows what else, going to rock concerts and just having a good old time?
Well, it didn't happen like right after. I was probably a year after that, but it was actually an amazing time. There was a lot. It felt like I got to experience freedom, like advanced freedom, you might say. You're going to go, and there's a lot of people that were doing the same thing, and it just became like a family that went around together, and it was just an amazing time, and everybody was into the adventure. It was just amazing to be able to just travel and to travel.
When did you start getting into not only using drugs, but selling drugs? And what type of drugs were those, as well as how much money did you make on a weekly basis from selling?
Well, I would, I did a little bit of weed, a little bit of selling that back in the day. The LSD was more just for my friends in Florida. And I actually, all in all, probably didn't make money off of it. I made money vending. In the long run, I lost a lot of money off it. And I lost 26 years of my life. But even so, back then I would, like what I was charged with was like 9,000 hits. And I was only selling for 60 cents a piece. So when you look at it and those numbers, there's not a lot of money here. You're talking about, less than $4,000 back then. And as far as but I used to vend, I used to sell like fried bread. I sold other things too, but that's what I did for years. And I made very good doing that, just vending.
Just selling munchies.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It wasn't probably the healthiest thing, but I really got into the health since then. And it was actually at a show that I ended up really trying to be healthy and get healthy. It was there. And yeah, I did LSD back then, and decent amount of it. And I was like everybody else, like I did it. Even if some of the bigger people in the world that are very well known, like Tim Scully and other people like that, they did some, and they wanted to either to know how to make it, or they wanted to know how to get it and like share it with their friends. It was like a mind open. It opened up your third eye. It was, we took it, but it was more like we looked at it as a sacred substance. And even nowadays it's being studied in many schools. Although that's not for me. I'm not a psychologist, and I wouldn't buy it or sell it or anything again. However, I do believe it has benefits for mankind, and there's many people studying that, which I'm really glad to hear that, actually.
Let's talk about your first two arrests, which was Strike 1 and Strike 2. You were first arrested in Panama City, Florida for LSD possession and later released. Was that just petty charges, just you got caught and were arrested and just released shortly after?
Well, I was in Pinellas County, and this friend of mine was arrested in Bay County, and he was in the actual jail, and he called me like he was trying to set me up from the jail, and I didn't know that. And I also was going to fly to a Jerry Garcia concert in California the next day. So he basically convinced me to send him 500 hits of LSD and some cash up there. And he's like, I'll sell you 100 hits of ecstasy at a good price. And I didn't even mess with ecstasy, but I had a friend of mine that wanted some, and I told him, and he's like, yeah, let me get that. So he decided to drive up there. So he was arrested. And then they came to me the next day and arrested me and brought me up there. And I said, I'm not here. I wasn't in your town. Like, they gave me a public defender when I got there, and I said, 37 days. Basically, I was in jail for 37 days. They gave me a $75,000 bond, which I couldn't make. And but after 30 days, they got a 10-day extension. They didn't file formal charges. And then they finally, after 37 days, they pulled me in and said they're not going to file them on time. So they had to release me on an ROR. Because I never admitted anything at the time, and I wasn't in their town. So really, I was 8 hours away, and a transaction was made, and there was no such thing as conspiracy law back then for the state. So they didn't really have a charge against me, really. So I got out on that, and I postponed the dates. I kept postponing it. And then I did catch another charge in Clearwater, Florida.
And that was Strike 2?
Yeah, but these, at that point, they weren't really strikes because I hadn't gone to court yet. So the one in Clearwater, my friend's friend was setting him up. He was not setting me up, but he met me in this parking lot, and I gave him some stuff. He went across the street with it. And then like 3 van loads of guys with masks on, they had me on the ground and basically took us to jail. They wrote in the it was like March 1st, 1990. They wrote LSD worshiper arrested because the only thing that I told them, I said I consider LSD a sacrament, and I'll never help you, do anything, get anybody in trouble for it or anything like that. So they wrote that. So I had a $22,000 bond for that. And by the time I had the money to bond out, which was a couple weeks had went by. And so they didn't file formal charges again. And so it got to be 30 days, and they still didn't file them. And then finally, at same thing, 37th day, they released me on an ROR. But of course, I had that other charge in Bay County, and I had that charge. And now I have 2 charges I have to go to. And since they released me for free, I decided not to go to either one of them. My favorite band was playing in Boston, and I jumped on a plane and flew there the next day as soon as I walked out of there. Even though I was supposed to go to ROR office on Monday, I didn't go. I went right to the shows. It was kind of like, at the time, like I believed in lyrics and still do, to a lot of respect, and I thought that was more important than dealing with that. So I left, and then ended up going to California, and one day I ended up going back to Florida, and while we were leaving Florida, we got pulled over, and 2 years had transpired, and I ended up having to answer for those 2 charges. So they took me to Pinellas County first. As soon as I walked in there, they offered me 18 months in prison or 3 years probation. And I took the probation because, plus I had a violation. I had a failure to appear, which is a separate charge. And so I took the probation because I still had Bay County to go to, and I can't get out of jail yet. Anyways, I have to go there. And when I went to Bay County, they offered me 3 years in prison and no probation. Like, they wanted me to do 3 years of prison. And I said, well, I want a jury trial because I wasn't even in your town. There's no really actually charge you could charge me with. And I told the public defender I would consider pleading guilty if they ran a concurrent probation, because I had no idea if you plead guilty that they could use that to enhance you in the future. I didn't know any of this. They didn't tell me in either court case, which they do nowadays. If you're sentenced now, they tell you if you plead guilty right now, they can use this to enhance you in the future. But they didn't tell me that in either one. So when I finally went to court, apparently the judge didn't think that I should plead guilty. So she said, you just plead no contest. And then she gave me adjudication of guilt withheld, which I didn't really know at the time. And so they really shouldn't have used that charge to enhance me on the federal level. But by the time I found all that and got all the transcripts and everything, 1996 came about, and I already had been sentenced, in 94 for federal for another charge after, I caught another charge after these 2 charges. Same thing with a friend setting me up, basically, is what happened. And, I ended up getting a life sentence, 2 life sentences. And they used those 2 charges to enhance me. And then they made a 1996 anti-terrorist bill that made it so I couldn't even get back into court for an appeal or for habeas corpus, basically. And so even though I had a merit to get back in, which I still would have did between 21 and 27 years, I believe it was, I still would end up having that sentence of those numbered years, but I wouldn't have had a life sentence. I still would have had a lot of time, but I wouldn't have had life. At least I saw probably an end some way, somehow. So that's basically how that all transpired.
Let's fast forward a little bit. Can you talk about the 3rd arrest, which ended up in the inevitable life sentence?
If you know anything about LSD, a gram makes 10,000 hits. So really 1.3 grams of a substance gave me life. You know what I mean? If you look at it on those levels.
So how did that case come about? I know there was something you were mailing them back and forth, and your father actually came into the picture, and he did prison time as well, right?
Yeah, my father ended up dying in prison. He, what happened was I was selling to this guy, and he was arrested, and he started setting me up, and he started wearing a wire and all that. And his name is Jeff Rhodes. He's in St. Petersburg, Florida. Yeah, he was setting me up. And then when I left Florida, like I was in Florida with him, and he was setting me up the whole time. And I told him I'm leaving, and they could have arrested me. But instead, they kept going and trying to build a bigger case. So I left, and then they wired me money. And I sent a package with 9,000 hits in it. And 2,000 was for my father. Like, he was going to give it to one of his friends. My father didn't equate an envelope to be anything. He never did LSD. I was the one doing it. And I had a good friend of mine. 500 hits was for him, and he ended up, when it was delivered, this guy had set me up. So he knew it was going to be delivered. So he called the police and said it's going to get there whenever, tomorrow. So when it was delivered, I sent it to this friend of mine's business. And so he cooperated on the spot, and he called my father and he called my best friend and said, hey, come pick this stuff up. And when they did, they were basically arrested. My father was just trying to get some for his friend. He didn't equate it to, he certainly didn't equate an envelope, a little manila envelope, to 10 years in prison, and he had a big fireworks company. He was like the first person in Florida to start selling fireworks, and he built it from the ground to a big deal. And I helped him, actually. That's one of the things when I went to Florida, I helped him do, working for him all the time. And he was charged with 2,000 hits that was in that envelope. And he was basically just getting that for a friend of his. And my friend ended up getting 5 years for 500 hits. And then there was somebody else involved that nobody knows who it was for. There was another envelope that was for 1,000 hits. I'm the only one that knows who it was supposed to go to. And that person, never got in trouble either. So, which is a good thing. Luckily, because I didn't tell the guy who I sent it to, who I was giving all this stuff to. I had my father's name, it had my friend's name, and they both called and basically the guy was already busted. So he cooperated, and he probably would have had a life sentence also, because he had 2 priors. Instead, I think he served 6 years. I think he ended up serving 6 years. And my dad died in prison. He had like a year and a half to go home, and he ended up dying in there. And then he had that business, and this woman took us to trial, and she won the business. So it's like, kind of like lost everything because of that deal I made, I guess you could say.
When your father passed away in prison, how'd that affect you?
It was really sad. I mean, I was in prison. I was in USP Atlanta when it happened. And, the chaplain came up to our unit, but he had this cart with him, and he was dropping off, and he wanted to like drop all these boxes off. And, and I knew him a little bit. So I said, hey, you need some help? So I started helping him unload these boxes off of this cart. And he didn't even tell me anything at this time. And then after I'm done helping him, he goes, oh, by the way, he says, Timothy V. Tyler? I'm like, yeah, that's my father. He goes, well, he passed away. And I was like, oh my God. And he took me down to his office, and I called my mom and sister, and I didn't know what to do. I wasn't raised or born Catholic or anything, but I went to basically a Catholic service, with a friend of mine. He's like, come with me to this service, and I did that anyways, at the very least. And I guess you get sensitized, when you're inside. Some things, I broke down over it, but it was just like, I don't know, he died of a heart attack. He had a heart attack when he was 38 years old. He was really young, his first one. And he had bypass surgery at a young age. So when he died then, he had triple bypass surgery while he was inside. And he didn't, as far as I know, he didn't change his diet. So, he ended up dying. And, it was a really sad thing, but just the way that they told me about it was like, oh, nonchalant, like, oh yeah, by the way, did you know this? Instead of coming to me to tell me the story, they waited while I unloaded all these boxes with them and then told me this. It was just something else. And then my sister had his funeral on video cassette, which she said I shouldn't even watch, and I haven't watched it. She's like, you should just remember him how you remember him instead. So, it affected me. I was like, I didn't know what to do. I was doing life, and I just didn't know what to do. And then he had a girlfriend. They weren't common law wife or anything, and she wanted to take everything from her family, and she basically won his business after a trial. They took us to trial, my mom and sister, and she won the business, and then they illegalized fireworks 4 days later. So basically, she had to sell buildings. And she basically retired right then. So like everything happens for a reason. But yeah, it affected me. I was, in a bad way, I guess.
So at the age of 24, you're convicted on federal charges under the 3 strikes law. You're essentially sentenced to die in prison in the feds. What was that like when you got handed down that sentence when, essentially you were still a kid in a lot of people's eyes?
Yeah, well, when when I was sentenced, like, I didn't really feel it or think about it like that exactly. I looked at the year 2012. I believed in that for a long time. Mayan calendar and Jerry Garcia speaking of it and all that. So I like already had put it in my mind that I was going to be in prison until that date, minimum. Like I already had that. I knew that I was going to be in there until that date at least. But so when I was sentenced, right after I was sentenced, within like a couple minutes, they walked me back downstairs, and on my way back down there, or as soon as he sentenced me to that, these two police that were involved with arresting this charge, they jumped up and high-fived each other in the courtroom in front of my sister. My sister was right directly behind them, and she got to see that, and she started like crying pretty hard, heavily over that, right? And that in turn made me kind of like break down too, because I mean I was taking it. And then I was like, just to see her and seeing them and see that whole, I saw it all myself. So I broke down a little bit, and they brought me downstairs, and my father was just sentenced to 10 years, like a couple hours earlier. And he was free up until then, me and him played a tag team in postponing this case for 2 years. Even though I was inside, I couldn't get a bond. I didn't mind, I wanted him to stay as long as he could, or how it turned out. So when I went downstairs and I told him, I said, yeah, I just got life, and he just got 10 years. He's still in shock because he was just free 2 hours ago, and now he's in custody, And he told me it was sad. It was really sad. And another level, they put us in the same place, in the same county jail for like a month until I was sent to the prison. When we were together and we arrived in the same block and everything, and we got there, and I told the people, this is my father, and I've been there for a long time, and they knew me, so they put us in the same block together. He told me, he says, I can't do it. He says, I can't do 10 years. He goes, I can't live this 10 years. I'm not going to live. He told me that, and I sort of knew what he was saying might be true because, the way he ate and his health already, So that was like our last conversation, pretty much. One of our last conversations was right to that.
So you guys weren't locked up together or weren't able to correspond back and forth when you were in the feds?
Yeah, we were able to correspond. I can write him and he can write me directly from prison to prison. You're allowed to if you're next of kin, or if you're relatives, you can get permission. In most cases, you can. And they gave us permission. So yeah, we would write each other directly, send letters to each other and stuff like that. So yeah, I was able to. I also was able to do to make a call, three-way call once, maybe twice with him. Not legally, but we did it just to talk to each other. Just to say hi. But yeah, I was able to correspond with him. But he was in a medium, and I was in USP Atlanta for 7 years there. And I went from being like at the shows or wherever. I was still like a non-violent person, pretty much. I didn't really have fear, but I also didn't go after people. I'm not inclined towards violence. And so I rolled into a place, but luckily some people, Italian people and others, befriended me, and because of them probably, and first friendships I formed in there, they looked at me, I guess, like since I left prison, I write a couple of them still, and one of them is still alive. And he said, well, the real reason why, like, we befriended you is because we didn't think you belonged in there. This is like, you didn't belong in there. You weren't like one of us or one of, they didn't feel like they didn't look at me like as a person that belonged there. And they feel like it was their duty to help in some way. And they liked me, and I started playing handball and learning handball and playing with them. And they actually had tennis courts back in the day. So I played tennis too in there. But a lot of handball I started playing, but it took me years before I started actually doing that.
So you would just spend your days in prison, just mingling, playing tennis, and doing whatever you can to relieve your mind. And
well, for the first 6 years, I didn't know better, and they had something called Unicor, where my friends were like, "Hey, you can come down here," and and they have a factory. They make mattresses for like the Army, Navy, for other prisons. They make them for various. And my friend's like, yeah, we play cards all day, and we get paid. So I went down there, and what they said was true, but they also work hard for like 2 hours out of the day, I guess. This particular job. Other people work hard all day long. So I ended up doing that for a little bit, and then I was offered into this office. They had an office, so I was offered a job working in the office, still working in basically a factory. That's what it was. It still is. And I didn't know better. I didn't know what it was about, but then I looked at it like, by them locking up nonviolent people such as me, I'm a perfect candidate to work these factories. You know what I mean? And I didn't realize it at first, but then I did start to realize this. You keep locking up nonviolent offenders, weed guys, LSD guys, or whoever. Those people are perfect to run these factories and to work in them. And so I kind of like I did that for like 6 years. But I would take vacations, and then you could go out at night. And eventually it took me years, and I started playing handball. And finally, for the last 2 years while I was in there, I wanted to not work in there. I didn't want it. I just couldn't get myself to stop doing it, because I was doing a lot of help for a lot of people while I was, I used to type legal work and copy stuff for people, do a lot of different things. And I just couldn't get myself to stop doing it. But once I did get, like, if something happens in your room and you go to the hole or whatever, there's a lot of different reasons why you would go to the hole. But if you get in trouble, then you lose your job. And basically, so I lost it, and I was kind of like happy. And then I started playing handball seriously then. And then I never looked back from there. I found it to be more important to try to be healthy and try to like really exercise. And that's what I started doing. And I got to be very good at it, at handball, and also eating healthy, I guess, as healthy as you can inside there, which is very hard to do.
2+ decades after you were in prison, you had quite a few people advocating for you. And on change.org, there was a petition that over 400,000 people had signed, and it reached Barack Obama, and you were granted clemency in August of 2016. Did you ever think that you were going to be released from prison, let alone have 400,000 plus people fighting for you?
I did have a lot of hope when he was elected, because you may not know this, but the Grateful Dead band themselves never supported anybody. They never supported anybody for candidate, for president, and they reunited to support him. So for me, when he was elected, it gave me a massive amount of hope, and it was, and it coincided also with 2012, because he was elected in 2008 or 2009. And so I felt the hope right there. I was so hopeful, in fact, that I filled out a clemency right then, as soon as he rolled into the office. I was thinking, oh, well, he's going to look out for, the deadheads, like there was a few of us. There was at least 3 that I knew that were doing life for LSD. And one of them was another one named Rudd Walker, where my sister was instrumental in helping him get like 150,000 signatures. And he ended up dying of a heart attack. He was only like 41 years old. And he didn't make it out, but he probably would have been released too, because the other person, Rob Riley, he was released on his last day in office. He let him go. Another deadhead doing life for LSD. But yeah, I got a lot of hope there. And then especially when 2012 came in and they legalized in 2 different states, and you saw a little shift of consciousness coming. And then I guess within 2 years of that date, that's when I started, my sister did an interview in 2014 for CNN that went viral at the time. And I did one without permission from USP Canaan I was in. And, the warden came to me the next day. He's like, you're not supposed to do that, but it's too late now. You already did it. And basically they sent word for me to take 3 classes, and they would send me to a medium. And they sent me to like the best medium in the country, as far from what I understand, which is Jessup, Georgia. And like for me, it felt like getting released. Like I was sent there, and I felt like I was released by getting there. You know, because in the pen I was at, they cut them in half, and like you could go to eat for an hour and a half, and then you go back home. The other side goes to eat. They go back to their unit. Then you go out to rec separately, and everything's separate. And you can only do it an hour and a half at a time. When I walked into that medium, you can go out for 8 hours if you want, early in the morning all the way till 3:30 in the afternoon. And it was like being free. It was like experiencing freedom. I like to sit back and watch and observe things, even freedom, even out here. And even in there, like I observe it and how they set it all up. And that just going from that penitentiary to that medium was like a big freedom boost. But then getting actual freedom, when they granted me the clemency, I couldn't believe it actually until I walked out of there. And then, you know, when I did actually walk out that gate, it was like the sun was different on this side than it was the other side. It was just like totally an amazing. I got a lot of hope, but I didn't actually feel like I was going to be free. You know, I had a massive amount of hope when he was elected, just based on the Grateful Dead helping him. They were instrumental in somewhat, because there's a lot of family around the world that I'm sure voted for him just based on loving them, you know, and based on he was a pretty intelligent person, and he admitted this that he smoked marijuana in his life, you know. So just those two things seemed like there was a lot more hope there was when he was elected than before that, I should say, for sure. I never asked for clemency from anybody else, you know. And I so when he was put in office, I asked for one, but he never saw it. And 2 years later, they denied it in 2011. But then, you know, Julie Stewart at Families Against Mandatory Minimums, she told Professor Ogilvy at Catholic University about my case, and you know, they sent me a questionnaire, and they sent like 12 different people questionnaires, and out of those 12 they decided to choose 4 people to help, and they ended up choosing me as one of those 4. So and then also Syracuse University sent me one where they were willing to help me as a class project to try to get out. But Catholic University I already had committed to them, so they ended up helping me. And you know, it took them like 2 years to do it, and ended up, you know, getting granted eventually. But the first one I did on my own, it was denied. But the second one was, you know, and I did have a massive amount of support that I was thankful for and still am.
So you served 24 years and 27 days in a federal prison. What was the first thing that you did as soon as you walked out of those prison walls?
Well, in federal prison, that's true, but I also did 2 years before that in a county jail. You know what I mean? So I got arrested in 1992, August 3rd, and I didn't get out until August 30th, 2018 was my complete release date. But when I walked out of prison, was actually to go to I was supposed to go to a halfway house in Las Vegas. And so when I walked out of there, I was supposed to actually take a truck that another prisoner drives to the bus station. But my mother and my cousin showed up, and the people who were there allowed me to ride with them. You know, plus they had other people released. That the truck was basically full already. You know, it's just a little truck, and there's like 2 or 3 people. And they're like, well, you can just ride with your mom and sister, and they can make sure that you go there, you know, or you'll be considered escape or whatever. So I did. We went to the Greyhound. So that was the first thing, and I walked into the Greyhound. But I also had like, you say the first thing I did when I was released? Well, I walked to my mom's car, and she handed me one of these smartphones, which I never used before. Had no idea how to even turn it on, you know. And I called my sister with it. She's like, okay, slide your finger across. Now you'll see something that says phone. I dialed the number, and I called my sister. And I was like, you know, broke down a little bit. But I also had my cousin was there, and he visited me like in every prison I was at, you know, for a lot of years. So he was there, and he elected, like I was released in Jessup, Georgia, and I have to go to Las Vegas. and you're allowed to take a bus or a plane. And I elected to take the bus because, first of all, I'll be free for 2.5 days on a bus. And then that's one main reason, really, right there. So we went to the Greyhound, got bus tickets. While I was in there, I had did this interview with CNN, and it was with Nick Valencia and Wes Brewer. He was the one that hooked me up with him, and he's a freelancer photographer. So he decided to take the bus trip with me. So he was going to meet me, which he did. We got on the bus, me and my cousin and I. We got on the bus right near Jessup, Georgia. And then at Savannah, we had a layover there. Well, while I had the layover, Wes Brewer mic'd me up, and he recorded me professionally from there all the way to Las Vegas, doing everything. We still have like all that video, and it's just sitting there pretty much. But I'm sure it'll be used one day properly. But at the same time, he rented an SUV, and he put me in. I got to see GPS for the first time, and he took me to Tybee Beach. Like, I was literally at a beach within 1 hour of being released, which I wasn't supposed to be. But I looked at it like I had an itinerary, and they changed the itinerary first by allowing me to go with my mom. So I figured, they said the main thing is you have to you have to be in Vegas at that halfway house on that date. End of story, right? So he recorded me going to this beach from 26 years in there, and like going to a beach, man. It was like a big deal. And I broke down in the sand, and then I went actually in the water, in the ocean, and like I said, he recorded me. Like, even these phones, like, I got to watch. I was released on May 29th, okay, to go to a halfway house. So this was May 29th. I actually went to the beach. That's why every May 29th, I have to go to the beach somewhere, that I'm free, that I have. I did it in Santa Cruz, and I just did it in Lake Mead this May 29th. So he took me to the beach, and then once he got on the bus with me. We went to Atlanta, and then in Atlanta, there was a lot of picture taking and videoing of people, and there were people there it was just really amazing. I was kind of like overwhelmed, by all the stuff that was going on, especially trying to figure out how to navigate all the computer systems and all that stuff that's at the bus terminal, And well, they were there and they helped me. My cousin and Wes, they took the bus trip with me, and Dead and Company was playing the day after while I was on the bus. So Wes hooked it up so I can watch them, and he filmed me watching them. It was like, holy cow! I mean, the technology and like, it's just amazing. I'm on a bus traveling across country, just released like the day before, and I'm watching a live show from a live concert right now. My favorite band is playing, and I can watch it like on a telephone, travel on it. Like, I couldn't even comprehend this stuff a couple years ago,
Pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, like, the technology is pretty amazing what they have, and there's even a lot more.
So you've been out of prison almost 2 years now. What have you been up to these days? How's life after prison treating you?
I've been mostly traveling around. I met this girl at J-Rad, and we've been doing a lot of traveling. It's been amazing. I still been instead of me like settling down somewhere, where I did settle down. Actually, I settled down in Maine for 18 months with this girl. It was not the best environment for me, or at least not the best relationship for me. And so since I left there around January or February, I guess I left there in January, and I met this girl in February, and we just did a lot of traveling. Like, and I'm visiting my sister. I spent a month with my sister's house right now, and I'm visiting her again right now. And so while I was for 18 months, I didn't spend a lot of time with my sister and my mother, really. And that was because of the relationship I was in. And now, like, things are way better. You know what I mean? Like, my sister and my mom, they like the girlfriend that I'm with. And so, like, some of the stuff that I had planned to do when I was released, I didn't do until very recently, and I didn't know, I didn't know. Everybody says like the first woman you experience when you are released, you fall in love, and it sort of happened. Like I understood it, and I ended up leaving and moving to Maine with this girl, and since then I moved on, and moving on has been, I did a lot of things that I didn't do for those 18 months. And I did do a lot of traveling with her too, though. We went to Mexico and stuff like that. But then we stopped, and I wasn't really done traveling. I felt like, I wanted, like I have a son in Connecticut. I wanted to go visit. So I just visited him, and, my mom in Florida and my sister here in Vegas. So it's been amazing for the last few months. It's been, I've done more traveling probably than anybody that I know. And even though there's a pandemic, I've been doing like work that was essential. It's considered essential work, and just doing it just for that purpose, and luckily I have remained without the virus, so for now, I'm here in Las Vegas, and, lucky to be here, lucky to be able to, experience the sun from this angle and this side.
Is there anything that you're currently working on, any projects, movies, films, anything like that you're able to speak about?
Well, there is Seth Ferranti. He's basically writing this story. It's kind of based on some of the experiences in prison that probably needs to be told. And besides that, we're also doing this documentary. It's basically an LSD trade documentary, because it went from being illegal before I was born. I mean, it was legal before I was born. And then it became illegal. And then now it's coming back all these years later where it's being seriously looked at, as something that can help people instead of hurting people. And, people are really in colleges that are really researching and finding that it has tremendous potential in psychotherapy and all that, so in psychology. And so we're making a documentary based on that, based on the trade itself and how it's come full circle. And there's much more. And it also contains this friend of mine named Dr. John Beresford, who's a pioneer for making it come from the lab to the free world, you might say, back in the day. And his children are in the documentary also. And I mean, we got to see a lot of things organically unfold in front of the camera along with them, which was like amazing. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, he left behind these happy crosses. I talk about him from time to time just because he was like also like a high priest in Wicca, or in magic, you might say. So he left behind these happy crosses, which I found because I was given one. I found out about, and then I mentioned it. The person that gave it to me mentioned that I should tell his son about that I was given this cross, and I told his son. He's like, "Oh, I have like something like 280 of them they've been saved since 1989." I was like, "Well, those are probably pretty valuable, you know what I mean?" And so he's been allowing them to be sold, I guess, recently. So yeah, but it's just something I found out about, and luckily it's able to help him. They're also going to be able to help fund part of the documentary, the way I look at it, and other things. So that's just one little thing that I like to talk about it, just because their father left it and he just had it sitting in a warehouse, and coincidentally his dad left behind a manuscript and he couldn't find all of it. And when he was looking for these happy crosses for me, because I said, I need to know how many do you have, because I wanted to know, because I'm like, I know some people that would love to have them. And he found out he had like 275 or maybe 280. And while he was looking for them, he found all the stuff that was missing for his dad's manuscript. And his father left behind scientifically, because he was a doctor, Dr. John Beresford, scientifically why LSD is a sacrament. He left behind that work. So his son is actually putting that book together right now And I'm like, there's going to be an interest in that book in of itself. Also, I look at it like, so for your dad to leave that book behind and some happy crosses, which he envisioned to be like something to help transform society. It's to raise consciousness. It's like, it all kind of like is an interesting picture and story in of itself. So I just talk about them, just because for that reason, it came to me organically. And not only that, but his dad wrote me for 15 years and his son wrote me for the last 10 years. So it's like, ever since I've been in prison, their family has written me. So I felt like, it's my duty to like, and there's also some friends of mine that want to make a nonprofit for Dr. John Beresford. They want to make it and they want me to help in whatever way I can. I will help for sure. I think it's a really good idea. And, just because Albert Hoffman, he invented LSD and he was considered a hero in Basel, Switzerland, where he resided, for that invention. And many people are looking at the value in it right now. As many schools are studying it, and it's becoming seriously investigated as something potentially to help out people with a mental illness, for that matter, and for addictions, for that matter. So I'm actually glad to see all of that. I'm glad to see that, and hearing some of those stories of people researching it while I was inside also helped me, gave me hope also, because not only because President Obama was elected, but because it was showing, I was seeing some of the studies that were going on, were showing therapeutic benefits to the substance. And I was thinking, well, maybe one day they'll let me out, and luckily I was able to get that through massive amount of effort.
Yeah, that's awesome after all these years. And I'm hoping that other prisoners that are serving, life sentences without the possibility of parole.
Like John Knock, he's one of them that I get. His sister and my sister have been friends for years, and he's in there for marijuana. He really should be out. I've actually seen big posters with him that I've took pictures with, try and help. And if I can, I try to help any way I can. Anybody serving for marijuana, because I look at it, even if you want to bring it to another level where there's people that are in the Bible Belt that, oh, that's an evil weed. But if you really look at it, go to Genesis and it says like green plants to produce seeds of its kind, that falls under that category. So, it's for the benefit of mankind. And then when you look at like the seeds, especially like hemp seeds, they're like so beneficial. They have all the amino acids for humans, so it's like, this is something that's really beneficial for mankind. And you can make everything, even like jobs. It could be massively produced right now where everybody can have a plentiful job pretty much, it's like, and you can make plastics out of it and clothing out of it and even paints for that matter, better paints than you can out of petroleum stuff, and better products than you can out of petroleum. So yeah, I feel like I'm an activist for that also, especially to help people that are in prison for it, because it should be legalized everywhere right away.
That was my interview with Timothy Tyler. Thank you for listening. Go follow me on social media so you don't miss any updates or news related to Unforbidden Truth. Twitter @UnforbiddenT, Instagram @UnforbiddenTruth, Facebook.com/UnforbiddenTruth. I'm out of here. We'll see you on the next one.